My name is Sally Richardson. I'm 31 years old. And this is the story of how I lost everything, then took it all back. The first time I heard the phrase rock bottom, I thought it meant losing a job, or getting dumped. Maybe a heartbreak, or a bad financial decision. But no. Rock bottom is when you realize that if you disappeared tomorrow, the people who raised you might not even notice, or worse, they might be relieved. 3 years ago, I was sitting in a 7th-floor apartment overlooking Franklin Avenue, watching the tail lights blur into red smears against the rainy glass. I still remember the feeling of the doorknob that day, slick with sweat. Not from heat, but dread. I was about to be evicted. I had nowhere to go. Just 3 months earlier, I had everything: a stable job as an account executive at Vision and Edge Advertising, a cozy apartment, a 10-year-old Mazda, and a routine. I was good at what I did. I believed that as long as I worked hard, I'd always find a way. No one warns you when the storm is coming, until it's too late. It was a Friday morning. Our CEO walked into the conference room with a clipboard. No warning. No layoffs announced. Just a list. Sally Richardson, he read, without so much as a glance. Thank you for your 6 years of service. We hope you find your next path soon. And that was it. My 6-year career reduced to a severance check barely worth 2 weeks of groceries. No handshake. No farewell party. Just a slip of paper and a pit in my stomach. I didn't cry. Not then. I told myself I'd bounce back. I had 3 months' savings, a strong resume, and a thick portfolio. But every job application was like screaming into a void. Interviews that never went past the first round. Hundreds of emails. Dozens of automated rejections. By month 2, I was stretching peanut butter and crackers into meals. The power bill fell overdue. My hands began shaking from caffeine withdrawal because I could no longer afford even instant coffee. When I saw the red slip taped to my door, my knees buckled. I sank to the floor, staring at those cruel words, notice to vacate. I swallowed my pride and picked up my phone. My hands trembled as I dialed my dad. Dad. I need some help. I lost my job. Just something to get me through the next month. He didn't skip a beat. You should learn to live within your means, Sally. When I was your age, I worked 3 jobs. Don't expect handouts. Click. Next, I tried my mom. Oh sweetie, she said, voice sugary but distant, I wish we could, but your father's health insurance just went up and, well, maybe skip the Starbucks runs? I hadn't had Starbucks in months. I was drinking tap water out of an old salsa jar. Finally, I called Tyler, my younger brother. The same Tyler I once gave $1,500 to help him move after his layoff. His reply? Maybe if you didn't waste money on nice clothes and lived in a cheaper area, you wouldn't be in this mess. Some of us have families to take care of. That fancy apartment he mentioned? 600 square feet, with chipped tile and a shared laundry room that rarely worked. I asked if I could come over for dinner, not to beg, but just to talk. To remind them I was human. They said sure. It was Mom's famous lasagna that night, but even the smell of baked cheese and oregano couldn't mask the tension. Brittany, Tyler's wife, stared at me like I was a failed experiment. This is what happens when your generation lives on Instagram and entitlement, she said, dabbing her lips like she was giving advice, not insults. Mom nodded. Back in my day, we didn't have the luxury of falling apart. We found a man, settled down. My father stayed silent, tapping his watch every few minutes. Tyler finally looked up. We have real responsibilities, Sally. You don't even have kids. You only have yourself. That one cut the deepest. I drove home with my knuckles white around the steering wheel. Twice I had to pull over because I couldn't see through the tears. The next morning, I got a text. Don't call again until you get your life together. We're tired of carrying you. That was the day I stopped believing in family. I sold everything, the TV, the tablet, the silverware set Aunt May gave me for graduation. I packed my Mazda with blankets, books, and old clothes. I parked behind a 24-hour grocery store and curled up with the emergency flashlight on, listening for every sound like a soldier in a war zone. In the morning, I drove to Planet Fitness to use the showers. That $10 monthly membership became my only luxury. I changed in a stall, tied my hair back, and walked out like nothing was wrong. Then I went to the public library. Wi-Fi, power outlets, and anonymity. I applied to jobs like it was a religion. 30 a day. 50. I rewrote every email like it would change my life. My meals became granola bars and water from the drinking fountain. I lived like that for 8 days. And then, by sheer luck, or maybe grace, I heard someone say my name. Sally? I turned, heart pounding. A tall guy in a beanie, holding design books. It's Jonah. From Lumino ads. I blinked. Jonah, the art director. He'd left our old company a year before the layoffs. I've got a little agency now. Just me and one other guy. It's small, but if you're looking for something part-time? That was the first hand anyone had extended to me in weeks. I didn't ask about pay. When can I start? I whispered. And just like that, the comeback began. I started at Nova Spark Creative 3 days later. It was a tiny agency tucked above a print shop and yoga studio in Midtown. The walls were thin, the windows were old, and the heating only worked when it wanted to, but to me, it was a palace. My desk was just a wooden table with one good leg and a stack of books propping up the other, but I didn't care. It was mine. Jonah gave me the kind of work most people would turn their noses up at, writing Facebook captions for local pizza joints, fixing up dusty brochures for a dry cleaner, building engagement calendars for a high school fundraiser. And still, I stayed late every night. No paycheck would cover rent, not yet. I was still sleeping in my car, still brushing my teeth in gas station bathrooms, still walking into Planet Fitness every morning like it was home. But now, I had a reason to keep going. Then one night, around 11:30 p.m., I was parked near a gas station when I saw a flicker of neon in the distance, help wanted flashing above a weathered bar with stained windows and a crooked sign that read, The Hollow Oak. I don't know what pulled me toward it. Maybe desperation. Maybe fate. I walked in, still wearing my Nova Spark hoodie, and asked for the manager. A woman with a raspy voice and a tiger tattoo on her neck came out from behind the bar. You ever bartended before? She asked, blowing smoke from a clove cigarette. No, I admitted, but I'm a fast learner. She raised one eyebrow. Can you keep your cool when someone spills whiskey on your shoes and blames you for it? I swallowed. Yes. She grinned. You're hired. Shifts start at 7. Ends at 2. Don't wear anything you love. So now, by day, I was a marketing grunt. By night, a barback. I poured drinks, wiped down vomit, broke up shouting matches, and memorized 18 different cocktails that all smelled the same. I came home reeking of beer and stale air. And still, I worked. 70 hours a week. No weekends. No days off. My back ached, my feet blistered, my mind buzzed with to-do lists I never finished. But bit by bit, the pieces came together. 2 months in, Jonah increased my hours. We picked up a few new clients, non-profits, a local eco-startup, a fashion boutique, and soon, I wasn't just writing captions. I was designing campaign strategy. I pitched new ideas, mapped out conversion funnels, ran A/B tests on landing pages. Jonah noticed. You're a beast, he said one Friday. You know that, right? I laughed, sipping coffee I hadn't paid for. No choice. That same week, I moved into a studio apartment in South Phoenix. It was barely 300 square feet, with peeling walls and one working outlet in the kitchen. But it had a roof, a toilet, a lock. And it was mine. That first night, I slept on a blow-up mattress, wrapped in my only warm blanket, staring at the single light bulb dangling from the ceiling. I cried. Not from sadness, but relief. A few weeks later, at the Hollow Oak, a girl walked in around 10 p.m. with a law textbook under one arm and a look of quiet exhaustion. She ordered water, sat in the corner, and stayed for nearly an hour before approaching me. "Do you know anyone looking for a roommate?" she asked. "My rent just jumped, and the paper-thin walls are killing me." I paused. Then I remembered my landlord had just posted a notice about raising rent soon. I hesitated. "Would you consider sharing a small studio in North Peoria? No frills. But brick walls. Quiet." She held out her hand. "Rachel. Law student. No noise. No drama." We shook hands over a stack of dirty glasses. The following week, Rachel moved in with a twin mattress, a rice cooker, and the warmest smile I'd seen in a long time. She wasn't chatty, didn't ask questions about my past. She just left food for me when she cooked, reminded me to stretch when I hunched over my laptop, and offered to split everything equally, without prompting. That apartment, worn, small, imperfect, became the first place I ever felt safe. We survived on dollar store pasta and old movies from the library. We shared shampoo, internet, and inside jokes about our loud upstairs neighbor who always seemed to vacuum at midnight. It was the kind of friendship that asked nothing and gave everything. And still, I didn't stop moving forward. After bar shifts, I'd log on to online courses. Marketing analytics, user behavior, lead funnel optimization. I didn't sleep more than 4 hours a night. But my brain was alive again. One day, Jonah asked me to present a case study to a prospective client. Not write it. Present it. Face to face. I stood in that small office with shaking knees and sweaty palms, explaining how I had taken a $2,000 ad budget and generated over 5x in conversions. The client nodded. Smiled. Signed. Things changed fast after that. Jonah handed me bigger accounts. Clients began asking for me directly. I was no longer just helping, I was leading. Nova Spark started getting noticed, and I was the quiet engine powering it forward. And then came Mercy Hope, a non-profit helping survivors of domestic abuse. Their team reached out to Jonah looking for someone real. Someone who understood pain but also understood branding. Jonah didn't hesitate. "You're it." For nearly 4 weeks, I barely left the apartment. I built their campaign from the inside out, not flashy ads, but real voices. Real women telling their stories, with dignity and power. The launch hit like thunder. The fundraising page tripled expectations. Donors flooded in. Media picked it up. A local news anchor called it the most authentic campaign in years. Nova Spark submitted the work to the Arizona Regional Media Awards. I didn't expect to win. But when they called my name, I froze. I stood on stage, gripping my note cards, staring out into a room of suits and strangers. And even though my parents weren't there, even though no one from my bloodline clapped, I saw Jonah in the third row, beaming. I saw Rachel filming through tears. And I felt full. I didn't build this campaign for recognition, I said. I built it so women would know they aren't alone. I know what it's like to feel forgotten. I just want them to know they matter. When I walked off stage, a man in a gray suit approached. "Anthony Green," he said. "Director of Communications at Southwest Union Bank. I'd love to hear more about how you achieved such impact on a lean budget." I blinked. Rachel leaned in and whispered, "They're finally seeing you, Sally." And I believed her. For the first time in my life, I believed it. After the awards ceremony, I didn't rush out with the crowd. I stood near the back wall of the ballroom, clutching a glass of water, trying to steady my hands. There was a strange feeling rising in my chest, not fear, not even pride. It was something quieter. Like closure. That's when Nathan Ellis approached. He looked like he didn't belong at a gala. His tie was half undone, his brown hair tousled like he'd been fighting with it since 5 p.m., and he was holding a champagne flute like he wasn't quite sure what to do with it. "I liked your speech," he said, his voice calm but sincere. It wasn't dressed up. It just hit right. I glanced at his name tag, Nathan Ellis, Union Vista Bank. We chatted for a while, about work, mostly. About ad strategy and media fatigue and why real stories matter more than gimmicks. No flirting. No ego. Just a conversation between two people who understood the value of staying quiet until you had something worth saying. When he mentioned his mother walked out when he was 9, something inside me softened. I heard myself say, "My family's kind of complicated." He didn't flinch. Just nodded. "Most worth keeping are." From that night on, we kept in touch. No games. Just presence. He'd swing by after my shifts at the Hollow Oak and wait outside so I didn't have to walk to the car alone. Sometimes he'd drop off groceries, or offer to drive me to thrift stores on weekends. It was never grand. Just steady. Rachel noticed before I did. "You've got that goofy smile every time your phone pings," she teased, folding laundry beside me on the balcony. I rolled my eyes, but I didn't deny it. I didn't talk about my past much with Nathan. I'd never told him about the nights I cried myself to sleep in the back of my Mazda or how I once ironed a blouse in a public restroom using the hand dryer. But he never pressed. He just stayed. And that was enough. Jonah started giving me more control at NovaSpark. I was leading client meetings, mentoring interns, negotiating budgets. I even began speaking at local marketing workshops. One day, while I was wiping down the counter at the bar after a slow shift, Nathan leaned against the edge and asked, "Have you ever thought about seeing a therapist?" I paused. "Why?" I asked, half defensive. He shrugged gently. "Because making it through something doesn't mean you've healed from it." That line stayed with me like a song stuck on loop. The next week, I found a trauma therapy clinic near Arcadia. I walked in twice, sat in the parking lot, and drove away. On the third try, I walked through the door. Dr. Corinne was in her early 50s, with silver-streaked hair and a velvet couch that smelled faintly of peppermint. Her walls were painted soft pink. Nothing fancy. Nothing intimidating. In the first session, I said nothing. In the second, I cried. By the third, I was telling her everything. About the lasagna dinner where they told me I didn't count as real family. About the eviction notice. About the silence from people who once told me I was the smart one. "You didn't get abandoned because you were a burden," Dr. Corinne said once. "You got abandoned because you refused to shrink yourself to fit into their small expectations." That sentence cracked something open in me. I started setting boundaries, quietly, firmly. When my mother texted to ask if I'd call, I didn't jump. I waited until I felt like answering. Sometimes I didn't answer at all. I wasn't being cruel. I was just choosing me. Nathan never asked for details. But every time I said something small, about a childhood memory, about my dad's coldness, about my brother Tyler's passive-aggressive digs, he just listened. "I don't need to know the girl you were before the storm," he told me one night as we ate burritos on my porch. "I care about the woman you became after it." Our lives started blending naturally. He helped install bookshelves in the tiny office I set up at home. He left sticky notes on my mirror with reminders to drink water or quotes from my favorite TED Talks. We were quiet, but constant. Rachel, meanwhile, was gearing up for her final year of law school. She still left containers of food in the fridge for me. Still checked in after long days. We'd sit on the floor of our apartment with instant noodles and rewatch courtroom dramas, both exhausted but somehow always laughing. I hadn't spoken to my parents or Tyler in almost 3 years. Then one day, as I was editing a digital campaign at home, I got an alert on Zillow. A small house in North Glendale had dropped in price again. It was modest, 3 bedrooms, gable roof, lavender bush in front. Nothing glamorous. But it had a yard, a porch, and a kitchen that didn't share a wall with strangers. I ran the numbers. Barely doable. But doable. I called Marcus, our client strategy lead at Nova Spark, and asked if he'd be willing to write a letter of recommendation. Rachel helped organize my financials. I submitted the application with shaky hands and held my breath for 2 weeks. When the approval email came, I fell to my knees on the apartment floor and cried. On moving day, Nathan carried in the couch I'd found secondhand. Jonah dropped off a toaster and a houseplant. Rachel brought pizza and paper plates. No one asked, "Can I help?" They just did. That night, we sat on the living room floor, boxes everywhere, eating pizza off our laps. It wasn't grand. But it was mine. No roommates. No eviction notice. No whispered insults disguised as advice. Just my place. My peace. I painted the walls myself. Hung up fairy lights. Bought curtains from a garage sale. And in the living room, I placed one photo in a wooden frame, me, Rachel, Nathan, and Jonah at Nova Spark's holiday party. They weren't blood. But they were home. And just when I thought life had finally quieted, the doorbell rang. The knock came again. 3 rapid thuds followed by a pause. I wiped my hands on my jeans. I'd just been rearranging books in my new office space, and walked slowly toward the door. Peeking through the peephole, my breath caught. Standing there on my porch, under the slant of morning light and the hummingbird wind chimes, was my mother, Sharon. Behind her, my father Gerald, my brother Tyler, his wife Brittany, and 2 kids I didn't even recognize. They weren't just visiting. They were holding luggage. Plastic bins. Duffel bags. A folded-up pack-and-play. It looked like someone had lifted a moving van and dropped its contents right onto my porch. Surprise! Sharon chirped, as if the last 3 years of silence and betrayal hadn't happened. You're not going to leave your family standing in the sun, are you? I opened the door. Not from politeness, but because I needed to understand what kind of madness had just landed on my doorstep. What's going on? I asked, my voice low. We sold our house, Gerald said matter-of-factly as he strolled past me, dragging a suitcase like it belonged there. And Tyler's lease fell through. Landlord doubled the rent. So, Brittany said, stepping inside with her phone already recording, we figured, why not consolidate for a while? You've got space now. She spun slowly in a half-circle, filming the living room. This is going to look amazing after a makeover. I stood frozen. My childhood dream home had been bulldozed and rebuilt without asking me. The kids bolted past, stomping up the stairs like it was a hotel. Seconds later, I heard a crash. A picture frame had hit the floor. Brittany didn't flinch. That'll be the kids' room, she said. Nice and bright. Your office downstairs? Gerald added, already removing his shoes like he was settling in. Perfect for us. Just until things stabilize. I blinked, still frozen. This was a joke. A twisted prank, maybe. Or a social experiment in entitlement. Sharon perched herself on my armchair, smiling as she scanned the room. You still have those purple pillows I bought you in college. Sentimental. No apology. No we're sorry. Just a colonizing stroll through the life I'd built from ashes. You live alone, Tyler said, now leaning on the kitchen counter. Why do you need so much space? My stomach churned. My hands trembled. But I said nothing. Not yet. I needed clarity before consequences. That night, I barely slept. I kept staring at the hallway where Brittany had hung a home sweet home sign on a tack without asking. I stared at the guest towels they'd unfolded and thrown on the rack like they'd lived there for years. I stared at the food missing from my fridge, the way my charger had been unplugged from the kitchen socket. They thought this was theirs now. No conversations. No permission. Just moved in. The next day, I called Nathan. "If you're free," I said, voice steady but firm, "I need a witness." He arrived in less than 20 minutes. Rachel followed, bringing a file folder and a calm fire behind her eyes. Marcus drove in from downtown, a quiet force of reassurance. I cleared the living room. Arranged 6 chairs in a semicircle facing mine, like a courtroom. Because if they wanted to act like squatters, I would speak like the owner. My father came in first, sipping the coffee I hadn't offered him. Tyler followed, eyes glued to his phone. My mother brought her signature dramatic scarf and teary voice. Brittany was outside filming the kids doing cartwheels in the yard. They sat. I remained standing. "I'm going to say something once," I began, my voice low, every syllable a blade. "And I'd like you to listen." Silence. I hit record on my phone and placed it on the table. "I called each of you 3 years ago when I lost my job. I begged for help. A meal. A floor to sleep on. You all said no. I looked at my father. You told me to live within my means. My mother. You told me to cut Starbucks, even when I was drinking tap water and skipping meals. Tyler. You called me irresponsible. Said I only had myself to worry about." I stepped closer. Well, I did worry about myself. I slept in a car behind a gas station. Showered at a gym. Applied to jobs with blistered fingers and hunger knots in my stomach. Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't blink them away. I built this house, this life, from zero. Without you. My father scoffed. "You're holding on to the past. We're in need now." Sharon nodded. "This is just temporary, honey. You have so much. We have so little." I walked over to a drawer and pulled out a manila envelope. "This is the contact information for the Phoenix Emergency Housing Center. They offer family assistance, and I've already made an appointment in your name." Tyler stood up. "You're kicking us out?" "No," I said calmly. "You were never invited." Brittany walked in just in time to catch the line, her phone still rolling. "You'd put your own niece and nephew on the street?" she asked with faux horror. "No," I said, turning toward the kids. I packed lunch bags for them. Water, fruit, snacks. Then I looked back at Brittany, ice cold. But I won't let them grow up thinking this kind of entitlement is normal. My mother began to cry, of course. "You're choosing strangers over your own blood." I motioned to Nathan, Marcus, and Rachel, standing in quiet unity behind me. "They are my family," I said. "They stood by me when I had nothing. You all vanished." Gerald's face turned red. Tyler looked like he wanted to shout. Brittany's lips twisted into a sneer. "You'll regret this," Sharon hissed as she stood. "No," I said, walking to the door and opening it wide. "I regret believing you'd ever change." They didn't go quietly. They slammed doors. Took videos. Left 3 suitcases on the porch as if to guilt me. I carried each one down to the sidewalk. I placed them beside the recycling bin. Not trash. But not part of my home, either. Inside, Rachel began clearing unused cups from the table. Marcus sat quietly, letting me breathe. Nathan placed his hand gently on my shoulder. No one told me I did the right thing. No one had to. That night, my phone blew up with passive-aggressive posts from Tyler. A blurry photo with the caption, blood doesn't mean anything to some people. Comments from relatives rolled in like waves. But I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in my life, I chose myself. And I wasn't sorry. The days after they left were oddly quiet. Not peaceful quiet, at least, not at first. It was the kind of silence that rang in your ears. Every step on my hardwood floors sounded louder. The lavender bush outside no longer rustled with children's laughter. My fridge was finally full again, but I hesitated each time I opened it, half expecting someone else's hand to reach in. I kept seeing it in flashes, the way Tyler had dumped his suitcase on my floor like it was a hotel lobby. The way Brittany recorded everything like she was curating content for sympathy. My mother's voice echoing, but we're blood. As if DNA justified everything they'd done. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I cleaned. For 2 straight days, I wiped every cabinet, aired every pillow, scrubbed away their footprints. It felt like I was peeling their presence off the walls. On the 3rd day, I got a message from Aunt Karen, my mom's younger sister. We'd never been close, but she was the only one in the family who hadn't sent a guilt-tripping text or bitter Facebook comment. Her message simply read, "I remember you helping Tyler pay for school. I remember the calls you made. They just never talk about that part. I'm sorry." I sat on my porch for a long time after reading that. Just sat there, the cool evening breeze brushing against my face, holding that little apology like a fragile glass figurine. It didn't erase anything, but it softened something inside me. It reminded me that not everyone turned away. 3 days later, Marcus called me into his office at Nova Spark. He looked unusually serious. Behind him, the company's development roadmap was scribbled in colorful ink on a whiteboard. My name was circled twice. "You're not just an employee anymore," he said, handing me an envelope. "You've led 60% of our key campaigns this year. You're the reason our client retention rate is the highest it's ever been." Inside the envelope was a partnership offer. An actual stake in the company. With it came a salary 1.5 times higher than my current one, full creative control over our nonprofit division, and a clause that named me as a board member. My lips parted, but no sound came out. Marcus smiled. "You don't need to thank me. You earned this." When I walked out of that office, my knees were weak, but not from fear. From the weight of the moment. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was rising. I met Rachel later that night at our favorite Thai place. She knocked over her smoothie in excitement when I told her the news. Nathan showed up a few minutes later with flowers from the farmer's market. No roses. Just lavender and wild eucalyptus, tied in twine. "You walked through hell," he whispered in my ear as he hugged me. "And still kept your heart. Now it's time to live like a winner." Rachel grinned. "You know what winners get?" I raised an eyebrow. "A beach house. Or at least a weekend in one." She had already booked a 3-day trip to Santa Barbara. Her, me, Nathan, no laptops, no client calls, no family drama. For once, I didn't worry about money. I didn't worry about losing everything. I just packed my bag and smiled. Before we left, I updated my medical records. For years, my emergency contact had been Gerald and Sharon Richardson. My parents. The people who ghosted me when I had $11 left in my account. Now, I crossed out their names. In their place, I listed Nathan Ellis's partner, emotionally and otherwise. Marcus Hall, mentor, friend, employer. Rachel Nguyen, roommate, soul sister, the only person who ever saved me with a pot of noodles and a hug. When the nurse scanned the form, she looked up and said, 3 emergency contacts? That's rare. I smiled. I've got more than one person who would show up without question. That's rare, too. The vacation was everything I didn't know I needed. We stayed in a small rental with creaky stairs and a view of the ocean. We played card games until 2 a.m., took long walks along the beach, and danced in the kitchen to jazz music playing from Nathan's phone. There were no texts from Sharon. No posts from Tyler. No guilt. Just peace. When I came back, I changed my locks. Not because I was scared, but because I was done giving old ghosts the key. I took the last box from the closet, the one filled with old bills, college letters, my father's cold typewritten notes, and tossed them all in the bin. No fire. No dramatics. Just closure. One afternoon, while sipping tea on the back porch, I wrote a note on a post-it and stuck it to the fridge. Only those who lift you when you're down deserve a seat at your table when you're whole. The day after that, I hosted a dinner. Not for family. But for the people who became my family. Nathan grilled vegetables in the backyard. Rachel brought dessert from a bakery she'd been saving for a special occasion. Marcus showed up late, as always, with a bottle of wine and a lopsided smile. We sat on mismatched chairs, ate on plates I bought secondhand, and laughed like we were free. Because we were. Because I was. 2 weeks after the dinner, I received a certified letter in the mail. The return address was a P.O. box in Flagstaff. No name. No clue who it was from. I slid my finger under the envelope flap, tore it open, and pulled out 2 pages stapled at the corner. The first was typed. The second, handwritten. The typed one was from an attorney. It stated that Sharon and Gerald Richardson had been wrongfully evicted from the home of their daughter without legal due process and were seeking a peaceful mediation to resolve the matter of temporary housing and familial obligation. My jaw clenched so tight it clicked. The second page was written in my mother's loopy, overly decorative cursive. Sally. This letter isn't to fight. It's to remind you that blood is forever. You might be doing well now, but don't forget who raised you. Who fed you. Who clothed you. You owe us more than this. Just a few months. That's all we ask. Surely you can find it in your heart to let us stay again. Love. Mom. My hands shook, not from fear this time, but from fury. They hadn't changed. They hadn't learned a thing. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted access. To the house. To my peace. To everything I had fought like hell to earn. And now they were trying to make it legal? I took a deep breath. Then I called the number on the attorney's letter. Richard Kavanaugh, the man answered, clipped and formal. This is Sally Richardson, I said. And you're wasting your client's money. A pause. I beg your pardon? I don't owe them housing, I said. I don't owe them forgiveness. And if you push this into court, I'll bring receipts. Emails. Texts. I have records of every time they rejected my pleas for help. Every cruel word. Every moment of abandonment. You won't win. But go ahead. Try. He was silent for a moment. Then, understood. Click. Rachel walked in just as I dropped the phone. She took one look at my face and didn't ask anything. Just opened the freezer, pulled out the emergency pint of ice cream, and handed me a spoon. We sat on the couch in silence. You know, she said finally, I think you just won a custody battle over yourself. I laughed. Actually laughed. It was true. For so long, I had been fighting to be seen, to be heard, to be chosen. I used to think if I just worked harder, did more, they'd come around. But they hadn't. And now I saw why. They didn't want me whole. They only wanted what they could use. That realization didn't hurt anymore. It liberated me. 3 days later, I met Nathan outside my office after work. He leaned against his car, holding something behind his back. You free for a drive? He asked. Always, I said. We drove up to Shaw Butte trailhead just as the sun started to dip. Orange streaks stretched across the sky like brush strokes. At the top, where the city lights blinked in the distance, Nathan reached into his coat and pulled out a small, wrapped package. It was a journal. Black leather. Soft, thick paper. The first page had a note written in his careful handwriting. To the woman who rose like fire. This is for the stories you haven't told yet. For the peace you no longer have to fight for. For the quiet you finally earned. I closed the book and held it against my chest. And in that moment, for the first time in my entire life, I felt unshakably safe. That weekend, I updated the deed to the house. Not for legal reasons. Just a private act of closure. I had worked too hard to leave anything vulnerable to those who never built it. I also drafted a living will. No heirs from the Richardson line would benefit from anything I built. I listed Rachel as the medical proxy. Nathan as the executor. Jonah and Marcus as alternates. I even added a note for my therapist, in the event of my passing, please ensure the support group gets my journal library. There are things in there they might need to hear. It wasn't dramatic. Just clarity. Just control. I was no longer anyone's backup plan. No longer the single, childless daughter they could dump expectations on. I wasn't the disappointment. I wasn't the burden. I was the storm they never saw coming. Weeks passed. Work at Nova Spark surged. I led a new campaign with a national education fund, and our work was featured on a business podcast. My inbox filled with inquiries. LinkedIn blew up. A recruiter from a major firm in New York even messaged me. But I didn't want to leave. Not yet. Phoenix held the ghosts, sure, but it also held the proof. The bar where I cleaned glasses with shaking hands. The library where I applied to jobs while chewing on granola. The gas station where I curled up in the back seat, praying no one would knock. This city had tried to break me. But I'd bloomed here anyway. Nathan's hand found mine on one of our late evening walks. Ever think you'd end up here? He asked. No, I whispered. But I don't want to be anywhere else. And I meant it. The lavender bush outside my porch was in full bloom the morning it happened. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee, rich, dark roast, from a local shop I now supported monthly. I took it to the porch, barefoot, and watched a pair of sparrows chase each other across the fence line. The sunlight warmed my skin. There was no sound but the occasional chirp and the hum of a lawnmower 2 houses down. Then the doorbell rang. It wasn't frantic this time. Just one ring. Deliberate. I opened the door slowly, unsure if I should brace for a package or a problem. Standing there was a young man in a brown collared shirt and gray slacks. A clipboard in one hand, a badge clipped to his belt. Ms. Richardson, he asked politely. Yes. I'm from CPS, Child Protective Services. We received a report that you recently evicted 2 minors and their parents from your home. That the children were forced to sleep on the street. My blood ran cold. Not from fear. From fury. I almost laughed, but it caught in my throat. I see, I said calmly. Would you like to step inside while I show you some evidence? To his credit, he remained neutral. Professional. But I could see it in his eyes, he wasn't used to being greeted by someone calm, composed, and ready. I handed him the folder Rachel had helped me assemble weeks earlier, texts, screenshots, audio recordings. The eviction wasn't legal because there was no tenancy. No lease. No agreement. Just entitlement, dropped on my porch like a bomb. These are the lunch bags I packed for the kids, I pointed to the photo Marcus had taken on his phone that day. Their mother was live streaming while her kids trashed my hallway. They had transportation arranged, food, and housing resources. I went above and beyond. He scanned the evidence for several minutes. Then stood. I'm sorry to trouble you, Ms. Richardson. It's clear this was a family conflict, not neglect or abuse. Was it my mother? I asked softly. He paused. I can't disclose that, but people who file false reports often do so out of revenge or spite. He left, and I closed the door with shaking hands. Not because I was afraid of being punished, but because they were still trying to ruin me. Still trying to make me the villain in my own story. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the wood grain, breathing deeply. I would not go backward. I would not be guilt into silence again. So I wrote. That evening, I published a post on my personal blog, the one I'd started during therapy, mostly for myself. The title was simple. Blood is not a lease. I laid it all out. My years of silence. The rejections. The car. The bar shifts. The studio apartment. The second-hand pillows. The job. The house. I told the truth. I didn't name names. I didn't accuse. I simply reclaimed my own narrative. Within a week, the post had over 100,000 shares. Women messaged me from across the country. I thought I was the only one. You said everything I've been too afraid to. I gave them everything. They took it and asked for more. Even a reporter from a regional podcast reached out. Sally, your story represents something bigger. Would you consider telling it? I did. Not for revenge. But so the next woman who finds herself eating crackers in a car, after her family slammed the door shut, will know she's not alone. Weeks later, my mother texted me again. You really had to make us look like monsters to the world? Blood isn't supposed to betray blood. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Instead, I printed out her message, folded it into my journal, and wrote beneath it. It wasn't betrayal. It was survival. It wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. Now, I wake up every day in a house I bought with my own hands. I water the lavender bush and sip coffee while Nathan makes pancakes and Rachel calls to tell me about her latest courtroom victory. My office wall is covered with thank you notes from clients, sticky notes from campaign meetings, and one framed quote. The ones who show up for you without needing to be asked, those are your people. My story doesn't end with revenge. It ends with restoration. The restoration of peace. Of power. Of the self-worth I once bartered for crumbs of validation. I no longer fear silence. I no longer chase approval. Because I know who I am. Sally Richardson. Daughter of no expectations. Builder of new roots. Survivor turned homeowner. Ghosted girl turned partner. And this? This is my home. And no one walks in again, unless I open the door. Sally's story is one many know too well, being abandoned when you're at your lowest, only to be exploited when you've risen. But in her strength, we see a powerful truth. Family isn't defined by DNA. It's defined by presence, by care, by choice. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is draw the line and protect your peace. What would you have done in Sally's shoes? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Echoes, where every story reminds you that the past doesn't define you. How you rise from it does.